Hi friends. I think it is not even necessary to say that today the role of the automobile in the life of every person, without exception, is very large. Every day we get into our cars and go about our very important business. We use public transportation. And of course we often stand in traffic jams. The number of cars as of 2015 exceeded the mark of 1.2 billion units in the whole world. Well, of course, this figure is growing every day. We are used to seeing cars everywhere. They surround us as something commonplace. But at the same time, it is hard for us to imagine that some 100 years ago, only wealthy people could afford such transportation. And, by the way, then few people thought about the fact that cars will soon fill the roads of our cities. But friends, I think, as you have already realized, today we will talk not just about an ordinary brand, which cars any of us can meet in our yard. Today we will talk about what everyone associates with the word racing. Of course, it is Ferrari. Today we will tell you how the legend of the world automobile industry was born, and why this car is chosen by the best racers of the planet. And also, we will answer the most important question, why most of the cars are red in color. And I think you will definitely like this story. Enzo Anselmo Ferrari was born under rather strange or even mysterious circumstances. The whole thing is that officially, there is not a single document confirming the real date of birth of the future genius of automobile industry. It is believed that Enzo was born on February 20th, 1898 in Mondeo, although he himself says that he was born much earlier. The reason for this mishap is considered to be a heavy snowfall, which simply blocked all the roads and prevented the parents of the newborn boy from getting to the city hall to officially register his birth. Father Ferrari was engaged in repairing steam locomotives and even owned his own small workshop, where, in fact, and lived the whole family. The boy often remembered how he woke up and fell asleep to the sound of hammers. It was the same sound that stamped into his head forever. It was in his father's workshop he was able to get acquainted with the real rough men's work. His father had taught him how to work with metal with ease from an early age. He often gave him a little work in the workshop. And it should be noted that little Enzo did not disappoint his father. He coped with the work like no one else. However, despite the success in the family business, the boy realized early enough that such a life is definitely not for him. He dreamed of a job related to travel, a bright and busy life, or a journalist, or opera tenor. He certainly did not agree to anything else. But as they say, life itself puts everything in its place. Singing would certainly not do. Little Enz had no ear and no voice either. But journalism was better. Once he managed to attend a soccer match, after which he wrote a small article without any difficulties, which was even published in a local newspaper. Maybe it was such an achievement that pushed the boy to another childhood dream, to become one of the successful car racers. By the way, he had been familiar with Grande Éminence since he was 10 years old. It was at this age that he first visited his first race, which was held in Bologna. Having caught fire, he began to appear at such events more and more often, and his idols became Felicio Nazzaro and Vincenzo Leoncio. But, unfortunately, sometimes dreams can be forbidden, and this case was no exception. It was simply impossible for a boy from a very ordinary Italian family to become a racer. Where are the races? And where was our hero in old ragged pants? And his father often spent his evenings lecturing. He was sure that his son should become an engineer. That's why he tried to give him the best education. But no matter how hard he tried, Enzo did not like to study at all. The boy often skipped school and, of course, did not do his homework. And it so happened that the boy finished school before the proper time because of the unexpected death of his father, as well as the death of his brother. It was a very difficult period, but as they say, trouble does not come alone. On top of that, the First World War began, and as you might expect, the guy was immediately drafted into the army. It was there that the dream of the future racer began to slowly come true. The whole point is that he was entrusted to take care of the transport. And it should be said that with this duty, Enzo coped better than anyone else. And after demobilization, he knew for sure that he would fulfill his childhood dream, and in memory of his father, he would become the best in his field. It so happened that during the service he fell ill, so much so that even the medical staff simply stopped paying attention to him. But even here our little guy decided not to give up, and still made it out, and from that moment he has been very attentive to his health all his life. In fact, after demobilization he had nothing. He was very weak, had no education, and certainly no money. The only thing he had was just a dream, and he decided to realize it. So, not having any education but having great ambitions, he, with only one letter of recommendation from his commander, goes to Turin to get a job at the factory Fiat. But even here, not without disappointment. Arriving at the place, the guy received a very rude refusal. "Fiat is not a place for demobiles. We can't hire just anyone." This was the answer of the company engineer Diego Soria, and the young guy did not expect such a blow. Gathering all his strength in a fist, he still managed to get a job as a test driver in one of the companies in Torino, and a little later he moved to Milan, where he took a similar position in the company CMN. Thanks to his courtesy and positive attitude, he quickly got rid of the prefix test, and quickly took the place of a full-fledged racer. He loved cars, but even more he loved testing them and looking for any flaws. When he got into the car, after a few minutes, he could easily answer what needed to be improved and what needed to be replaced. He was guided only by his feelings about a particular car. And it's worth saying that his word counted. For him, a car was not just a means of transportation. For him, it was an extension of himself. And it was thanks to its qualities that in 1919, Enzo took part in his very first race on the Parmo-Berceto highway, and even took one of the prizes. Things slowly went uphill. He gained experience and gained new acquaintances. And it is in this way, in 1920, he receives a tempting offer from the leaders of Alfa Romeo. And he is invited to the position of playing coach, which Enzo, of course, could not refuse. During this period, he gets married and has a son. But few people know that the ideal husband and father was that still a womanizer. On the side, he always had several mistresses, and even children out of wedlock. And, by the way, he was able to recognize them only after the death of his wife. For example, his son Pierre is currently a vice president of the company and even owns a considerable fortune, which is estimated at $4 billion. That's how, working in Alfa Romeo, Ferrari often took part in various races. He went to the start 47 times, and even 13 times he managed to take the prize-winning places. But, despite all this, one day came the moment when the race stopped attracting him. He was interested in cars, their structure, designs, control mechanisms, but not in speed and victories. So, sitting by the fireplace in the evening, Enzo thought about what to do next. He did not want to continue his career as a racing driver, but at the same time he wanted to associate himself with automobiles. It was during that period that it occurred to him that he already knew enough to show the world the best car. It is also worth noting that at that time our hero was 39 years old, and he had already managed to earn good money from racing, and perhaps someone else would have been content with what he had and just rested on his laurels. But Enzo felt that wasn't all he wanted to show the world. Unfortunately, he couldn't become a designer due to his lack of secondary education and incomplete education. But even this did not stop Enzo. Thanks to his active activity in the company and outstanding oratorical skills, he still managed to attract the attention of Fiat designer Vittorio John. Using all his savings, as well as borrowing a considerable sum from friends and colleagues, in 1939, Enzo bought land near Maranello, where he began a large-scale construction of his own workshop for the production of cars and motors. Officially, the racing team, called Scuderia Ferrari, was founded in 1929, but began producing its own cars much later. Initially, it produced various equipment for cars under the brand name Alfa Romeo. Enzo Ferrari had a contract with this company, Production was gaining its momentum, but the plans of the young company made its adjustments sharply started World War II. Enzo realized that sports cars are less interested in mankind at the moment. The shop functioned at full capacity until 1944, when it was subjected to a heavy bombing. It took a few more years to restore operations. But even despite these difficulties, by the end of 1946, the factory was fully operational again. Our hero did not want to go back to what was. He dreamed of his own car, and did not want to produce parts for such terrible, in his opinion, Alfa Romeo. But again, he needed staff, and he found them. In 1946, thanks to his charisma and excellent communication skills, he lured the best engineer of Alfa Romeo, Joaquin Colombo, to the company. He was given a global task to make the best car in the world. It is also worth noting that Enzo himself was directly involved in its creation, from the layout to the technical solutions. That's how, in a closed hangar and under 7 locks in just 1 year, in 1947, the first car of the company, named Ferrari 125, was released. The model was equipped with a powerful 12-cylinder aluminum engine, designed to realize the dream of its creator, to give an ordinary road car the properties of a racing car, without compromising comfort. This car was supposed to participate in the race in Piacenza, but during the test runs it was involved in an accident, and it failed to materialize. It is also worth noting that even Benito Mussolini himself had a hand in the production of the first car. In fact, some parts for the 125th model were collected at the factory, which he himself sponsored, with the purpose of further production of military equipment. For quality work and interest in the development of automobile industry, Mussolini awarded Ferrari with the Order of Commandant. From that moment, all Enzo's subordinates called him so. By the end of 1947, there were already 2 modifications of the Ferrari engine, and its working volume increased from 1,496 to 1,995 cubic centimeters. The following year, Ferrari's own team won the Mille Miglia and Targa Florio races for the first time, and 1949 brought the team a new triumph in the same events and even a victory in the Le Mans 24 Hours race. Few people managed to produce their first car and win races with it. Time passed, and the company developed in many directions, but the main was the creation of racing cars, where any loss in the race was accompanied by a loud scandal on the part of NS. The best drivers of those times left him one by one: Niki Lauda, Phil Hill, Jody Scheckter. None of them could stay for long, and the reason for all this was the explosive character of the genius, who did not forgive mistakes and did not put up with the human factor. He used to say, "My friends are cars, and they're the only ones I can trust." Nothing stopped him, not loud fights, not even the deaths of racers. And he was on his way to his goal of creating a car that changed the racing world. He worked day and night, completely forgetting about rest. When you work without rest, you don't think about death, but that doesn't mean death doesn't think about you. But anyway, a Enzo, as they say, was everywhere at once. He didn't sit as a supervisor just in the office. He personally helped in the assembly shop and even in the dirtiest hangars, and soon his diligence paid off again. So in 1951 appeared the stage model 340 America, with an engine originally developed for the Ferrari GT, with a working volume of 4.1 liters. And in 1953, the same car is equipped with a 4.5-liter engine and gets a new name: 375 America. In total, by the beginning of 1954, Enzo Ferrari produced about 200 of its cars in the exclusive road version and 250 racing models. Creating his own road cars, Ferrari turned to different design companies, making his models different from each other. Enzo ran forward and did not notice anything around, but in 1956, he suffered a concussion. Suddenly dies Enzo's son Alfredo, after the loss of which Ferrari disappears and almost does not appear at events and does not even come to the races. Ferrari. Alfredo de Madness wanted to be just like his father. He genuinely admired his accomplishments, but never got to touch the Ferrari legacy himself. He died at the age of 23 from chronic nephritis. The day after his death, Peter Collins with a mourning bandage was able to win the Grand Prix of France in honor of his son, Enzo Ferrari. To date, it is believed that at the wheel of Ferrari killed more drivers than at the wheel of any other car. And that's a sad statistic. Having recovered a little from the loss, Enzo began to return to normal life, and in 1959 the 250 GT California appeared, which was produced to order as a striking example of the open 250 GT sports model. The 375 America and its 1956 successor, the 410 Super America, of which only 14 were produced, were designed for the powerful, with a sense of power and self-confidence. From 1957 to 1962, a modified Ferrari 250 GT California was produced with a predatory pointed profile and removable roof. This car won its first victory in the 1960 Touring Trophy race at Goodwood. Each race from Delaman to Targa Florio brought more and more new honors to the company's luggage, but one day, the streak came to an end. As it turned out, due to their character and authority, the company's employees were simply afraid to give Enzo accurate information about a particular race. As a result, he, as a manager, could not make adequate decisions to solve some problem. Once Enzo came to Ferruccio Lamborghini himself to personally talk about the shortcomings of Ferrari cars, but he never managed to get into the office of the evil Enzo. The commandant simply could not talk to anyone about his cars. This situation so hurt Ferruccio that he, thoughtlessly to rub his nose in it, decided to design his own supercar, trying to lure the best Ferrari engineers to his side. And about this on our channel was already a story, the history of the company Lamborghini. The link to this video will be in the description to the video. Many people probably wonder how the famous emblem came to be. In fact, the history of its origin is still unknown to this day, Enzo told his version. Mounted stallion as the emblem of the company, Ferrari, borrowed from Francesco Baracco, heroically killed Italian pilot on the fuselage of the fighter plane, which he was depicted. After a few years of the scuderia, I got to know the father of the dead pilot, Enrico Baracco, and after a while I got to know Francesco Baracco's mother as well. And one day, while talking to her, she asked me if I had a car and why it didn't have any memorable sign. It was then that it was suggested that I decorate my car with an emblem of a prancing stallion. "He'll bring you luck," she said. And I agreed. Of course, the emblem had to be slightly modified, adding a gold shield to the background, in the lower part of which were the letters SF, and in the upper part, the flag of Italy. The factory annually produced several dozens of supercars, which were created only under the clear guidance of Enzo Ferrari. He was the man who loved cars more than people. He put a piece of himself into each new model, and every time it gave his incredible results. Ferrari cars became not just racing cars, they became something much more. Ferrari even now sounds very loud and is associated with wealth and luxury. And by the way, it always has been. Enzo didn't want to make ugly stumps on wheels. He always believed that a car should be such that when driving it on the road, people stopped and watched it with open mouths, and the emotions that the driver of such a car feels cannot be bought for any money. That's what Enzo Ferrari once said. Men like beautiful girls, and beautiful cars like both. Ferrari owns some of the most memorable 1960s cars of our century. 250 GT in 1960 was transformed into a fastback 250 GTE, and from 1962 to 1964 on the basis of 250 GT was built one of the most significant cars in history, 250 GTO. 39 cars were produced in total, possessing a 3-liter V12 engine with an output of 300 horsepower. Further, every year appeared and modernized already existing cars. The most successful models to date are considered such as Ferrari Dino 246 GT, created in memory of the lost son Enzo Ferrari, Ferrari Daytona. This model has an engine located in the front, and the body itself is more reminiscent of the American car industry of the 1970s. Ferrari 512 Testarossa. This car with an engine capacity of 5 liters and 390 horsepower cost an unreal $181,000. And for the entire period of production of this model was sold at least 10,000 copies. Ferrari Enzo. An outstanding model named after the founder of the company. Ferrari F40 is a car released for the 40th anniversary of the company, where its original price was $400,000. But at the moment, its value is more than $1 million. And by the way, this is the last model that was created while Enzo Ferrari was still alive. Then there were Ferrari 288 GTO, one of which was sold at auction in 2015 for $2,750,000. Ferrari 275 is one of the rarest models. Only 454 were made, and the cost of each started at £600,000. Ferrari cars are something that can't just be put into words. This is something that must be felt and understood. Many people wonder why almost all Ferrari cars are red in color. And the answer is quite simple. It just so happens that for a long time, brightly colored designs were forbidden for race cars. Instead, one color for car paint was recommended for each country. So, for example, for France, the blue color was chosen. For Germany, white. For Great Britain, green, and so on. The red color went to Italy. Enzo has always been a patriot of his homeland, so he simply could not afford to collect a car of another color. As for the hero of our video, he died at the 91st year of life, quietly and happily. He died on August 14, 1988, in his native Maranello. The announcement of his death was not published until 2 days later, and this was done at the request of Enzo himself, to compensate for the late registration and his birth. Enzo Ferrari lived a rather modest life and rarely gave interviews. Many people were surprised and even shocked, to say the least, when they learned some facts about the billionaire's life. Can you imagine that the man the whole world knows, a man who has a huge financial fortune, connections, and a love for the beautiful floor, well, and of course, a beautiful car, rarely left even Modena and Maranello, except when the annual Italian Grand Prix was held in Monza, near Milan. He only left the territory of Italy once, in 1982, when he made a trip to Paris. He has never flown on an airplane and has never been to Rome, or even ridden an elevator, in his entire life. Strange, isn't it? On April 28, 1923, still at the age of 25, Enzo married Laura Dominique Gorella, and they remained married until her death. They had another son, Alfred Dino, born in 1932, who was raised as Enzo's heir. But he suffered from illness and died of muscular dystrophy in 1956. In 1945, Enzo had a second son, Piero, who was born to Enzo's mistress, Lina Lardi. And since divorce was illegal in Italy until 1975, Piero could only be recognized as Enzo's son after Laura's death in 1978. And, as I mentioned earlier, Piero is currently a vice president of Ferrari, owning 10% of its shares. Rumor has it that Enzo himself had about 9 children, but whether this is true or not is unknown. Only one thing is known. All of them received huge sums of money from their father, and he never refused them financial help. A couple of weeks after the death of his founding father, Gerhard Berger won the Italian Grand Prix in Mons on the car of the company Ferrari, dedicating his victory to the creator of racing cars, Enzo Ferrari. After his death, the management of the company changed hands. Each new director tried to bring something different, but no one managed to outdo the great Enzo. At the moment, the company is in the hands of John Elkann, who is the president of the company, as well as the chairman of the board of directors of Pierre Ferrari. At different periods, the company sold part of its shares to Fiat SPA and Fiat Chrysler Automobiles. To date, Ferrari cars are the truest status symbol, and not only because of the fact that almost on a permanent basis, they become the favorites of Formula One races, and thanks to the fact that the leaders of the company have always had a smart policy. Ferrari manages to stay on the Olympus for more than 60 years, and the company's reputation has long been working on the development of the company. In terms of recognition, this brand competes with such monsters of business as Disney, Hollywood, and Coca-Cola, attracting more and more attention. And every second person in the whole world, according to the survey, associations with expensive and cool cars are often Ferrari. Well, as you can see from this story, all of this became possible thanks to the dream of an ordinary boy who changed his life without even realizing that at that very moment he was changing the lives of millions of people. Nothing is impossible, and everything big always starts small. Friends, it will probably be silly to ask if you have had an experience of owning such a car, so I will just ask you, what kind of car do you personally associate with status and wealth? Be sure to write your opinion in the comments. Well, that's all for today. Rate the video if you liked it, and see you soon. Bye.